Hey, today I'm going to talk to you about the composer Rachmaninoff. And yes, he is the Russian composer who supposedly could reach 2 octaves on the piano with one hand. And just for comparison, for those of you who do not play piano, my hand can reach a little over 1 octave. So if one of his hands could reach two, then one of his hands was like that. That's crazy. Anyway, today we're going to look at 3 different passages from a couple different of his preludes, and I'm going to go through and explain the different types of strong passions and personalities that he puts into his music. But before I do that, I'll talk a little bit more about Rachmaninoff himself. Now, he somehow is able to incorporate these passages in almost all of his pieces that are just so heart-wrenching and fill you with an intense longing or desire for something. And somehow these passages, which you'll understand more when I show you them in a few minutes because it's kind of hard to explain, but these passages are the type of passages that you love with such an intensity that you never want it to end because it's just so beautiful, so beautiful. But at the same time, it's so gut-wrenching that you just can't stand listening to it for very long. So it's this complex idea of, oh, I love it, but oh, I can't listen to it for too long, but I never want it to end. And it's very strange. And it's something that really only happens in Russian music, because there is no music like Russian music. And you'll understand in a little bit. It's kind of crazy. Now for this first passage, I want you to imagine this. You are out in the country, it's after dark, and you can see all the stars, and it's beautiful. You can hear the wind through the trees and feel the wind on your face, and you're just happy because you just like having that little break away from the hustle and bustle of society. So you're just enjoying the peace and quiet of the evening, and then you feel a couple raindrops, and you're like, okay, it's gonna rain. Cool, rain's cool. It's good for the grass, good for the trees. Fine. So you just decide to stay out there. Then it starts raining harder and harder, and then you see some lightning off in the distance, and you hear the thunder, and before you know it, you're in the middle of a full-fledged storm. So brace yourself, because you're about to experience a storm Rachmaninoff style. So now that we've seen how Rachmaninoff personifies a storm into his music, let's move on to that heart-wrenching intensity that I was speaking of earlier. Now this passage, it gives you a strong longing for something, and it's one of those that you never want to end because it's so beautiful and so amazing. But at the same time, it's so gut-wrenching that you can hardly stand it, and you're like, this has to end soon because I can't take it anymore. So prepare yourself for this crazy mix of emotions that only Rachmaninoff can do. So now we've seen a storm from Rachmaninoff's point of view, and we have a better understanding of how he combines the idea of it being so beautiful you want it to never end, and it being so heart-wrenching that you can hardly stand it. So let's move on to a different kind of feel of his music. And this next passage, I want you to imagine that you're in a building and you're sneaking around after hours and you're trying not to get caught. So you're tiptoeing around from room to room like, hee hee hee, no one can see me, no one knows I'm here, I'm so sneaky. Until you hear footsteps following you. And they start coming closer and closer, and you start tiptoeing a little faster and a little louder, and they get louder and faster, and they're chasing you around trying to find you. So it turns into one of those crazy scenarios where you're in one room and they pass you, and then you go into the other room, and then they go into the room where you just were, and it's like you're doing some kind of weird dance, like one step behind you the whole time. And so this passage, it starts off really small and quiet, and then it gets faster and louder, and it builds and builds and builds, and it's just, woo, it'll be fun, okay? So walk softly, because you might get caught. All right, so we have seen a storm and heartache and stealth. So that's a pretty good representation of some of what he can do, and it's just a few of the passions, the strong, raging passions that Rachmaninoff puts into his music. I leave you with this quote by none other than Mr. Rachmaninoff. Music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music.